Hello, my beautiful baddies. Welcome back to another episode of Your Inner Baddie Speaking. Have you ever felt like you've either learned from an experience or you've gone to therapy over something that's happened in your life, or you just feel like you've worked through something and then days, months, years down the line, suddenly you feel the exact same way about something again, or you feel like, okay, I feel like I've moved on from this, but why do I still feel this way? And I think something throughout my journey of picking the pieces back up and forming the life that I've always really wanted to live, and establishing my inner baddie and really just focusing on my confidence to move forward in life. Something that I kind of struggled with throughout this journey is realizing that healing isn't by any means, oh, we got a Burry sighting here. Healing by any means is not linear, healing, you continuously work through it. And now I feel as if I used to think once I've kind of learned from something, or I've gotten over something, or maybe I've just felt like I've come to a resolution about something, I'm like, okay, good, I'm over it, I'm done. You think that you kind of put that chapter fully behind you, but in reality, healing isn't linear. It can come back up. Stuff can bubble to the surface again. Negative patterns can come back. We are human, and even though we might have removed ourselves from one situation or one scenario, doesn't mean that something like that will never come up in our lives ever again. And I always really felt like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with that one piece of healing that I needed to do. Now I'm on to the next, right? I'm done with that, I'll move on, and then after that's done, I'll move on to the other thing. But it never worked like that. I mean, sure, I've definitely healed to get to a place where I don't feel as if maybe I react the absolute same way, or maybe, I don't feel like I'm back in it like I did, but I still find myself sometimes getting upset over things that I thought I had healed from, or being triggered by something that I thought I had figured out with my therapist and worked through coping mechanisms. And now I always feel like I'll reference healing as something that I'll probably do for the rest of my life. I think I'm always going to be healing. I am constantly evolving, and I'm constantly healing, and there's always something to improve. And that doesn't mean that it's always an uphill thing, okay, good, and then we're good, next checkpoint, okay, we're good, next checkpoint. Instead, it kind of fucking goes all over the place, but eventually you learn. I feel like in healing, you learn to ride the waves. So you might have an up moment where you're like, okay, I'm great. I've learned from so much. I feel like I'm healed. And I put that in quotes because I don't think there's ever an end point with healing. I think there's always issues that you can run into, or things that you have to confront, or things you thought you got over but you're still kind of dealing with, unresolved things. And I don't think that there's an ending to the journey. I think it's just that we're constantly evolving, and we're constantly working on ourselves. And in that process, you're always healing. And I used to get so down on myself because I would think, for instance, I've alluded to childhood trauma, and I've kind of talked about issues that I've had growing up. But one of the biggest things that I think has shaped me as a woman, as a person, and everything that I am today is the fact that I really struggled with having a relationship with my father, and it got so tumultuous. It got so bad, we'll just put it that way. It got so bad that I knew that it was hurting me more than I really cared to admit, I guess, at the time. I mean, I finally got the courage, I'll say, to cut my dad out of my life when I was a freshman in college. And we had always kind of struggled with our relationship, and I was younger, and I think the way that he was raised is very different from the love that our family needed. And I'm not here to make excuses, but I do understand that people are the way that they are for a reason, same way that I am the way that I am for a reason. But basically, our relationship was so stressful and so anxiety inducing, and that was one of the periods of my life where I first thought that the solution to all my problems was to end my life. And that is what I referenced in the first episode of this podcast, getting back there further in my adulthood, but I had felt this way when I was a child. And so it was just so strange that I finally gathered the courage to just say that for me, I needed to release that toxicity in my life. Otherwise, I was going to go down I could see the path ahead of me and where I was going to go. I was becoming the absolute worst version of myself, I think, and I wanted to cling to the best parts of me. And so in order to do that, I felt like I had to, and it goes back to one of those mantras and those sayings that I brought up in one of the last episodes of, in order to fly, you have to let go of all the things that are weighing you down. And I don't put the decision to not have a relationship with my father lightly. It was something that I really didn't want to do. I mean, it broke my heart to feel like I even wanted to do it, and come to that conclusion. So it wasn't a rash decision, and it was a hard one to stick to, I'll be very honest, but I came out of that thinking, okay, well, now that I don't have that toxic presence in my life, I'm okay, right? And I think that I had this illusion that if I'm out of that situation or I'm away from that person, then all of those issues that I had while I was around them just go away. And that's just not the case. And it ended up leading me to go to what I consider my first therapist in college, because after 3 days of an extreme depression, I realized I have so many suppressed feelings that I gotta deal with this. And it's hard to confront, but it's worth it to confront. But all that to say that I thought being out of it meant I'm done. I'm done with those issues. I'm done with those problems. I'm done with all of the insecurities and all of the feeling unloved and unworthy go away because he's not in my life. And years later, when I I guess I would say, had a little bit of a depression and a breakdown and a breakthrough to seek therapy and try to heal from this, I sat there and realized that I had bottled so much up because I thought it was situational that I never really healed from it. I thought I was healed because I wasn't around them, but that's not true. I just kind of shoved it to the side and decided, okay, be gone, problems be gone. And it doesn't work like that. And so then I started dealing with all of the trauma that I had unknowingly went through as a child. And I say unknowingly because at the time you know it's difficult, but you don't really realize the impact that it has on you so much further in the future. Like, it's not just I'm hurting in the moment, it's something that you can carry with you. And I think a lot of people understand that from childhood trauma or from just trauma in certain periods of your life, like you can carry that with you. And then I thought, okay, I've gone to therapy, I've worked on it, I've, done the phases of trying to forgive and doing all of these efforts to get myself to a place where I feel good about me and I can really focus on me instead of all of the baggage that I was carrying with me. And it wasn't until, you realize in certain conversations of if something gets brought up, you might be a little on edge about it. You start to feel defensive about it. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, I still might need to talk about this in therapy, because when people are like, oh, family's the most important thing and I would never give up on family, that would trigger me and it would make me feel like, okay, well, I took a step away from a family member. Does that mean there's something wrong with me, or did I do the right thing? And I think that's something I've always struggled with, is did I do the right thing? And could I have done more? Could I have? And that's what I mean when like healing isn't just, okay, I said it out loud, or I got rid of that person in my life, or I went to therapy. It doesn't mean it's done with. And so when I would have conversations and I would find myself like kind of triggered, I would be down on myself because I would think, I thought I overcame this. And there's a wave of guilt that comes with thinking that you're over something and then you're not. And then I thought, I addressed it. I figured now I can talk about him in settings, or I can talk about family, and I don't get upset. And even if it's not a visible upset, sometimes it's just an upset in my head of like going back and saying, did I do the right thing? Or questioning my path, basically. And then 10 years after not having a relationship with him, I got a gift out of the blue from him. And that sounds really great, but one of the things with my dad that I think was an effort on his part, but was a missed mark on my part, is that I think he always thought that gifts and money could just patch over something. So we won't talk about the problem, we won't apologize for the behavior, we won't take accountability, we won't say I'm sorry, but here's a gift. And hey, maybe I should have hung on longer to get more gifts. No, I'm just kidding. But in getting that gift and opening it up, and I was like, who is this from? It was just so random and out of the blue. And now I'm like an adult, like a full-blown adult, and I'm getting this gift from my dad, and I see that it's from my dad. And I just remember feeling not overcome with emotion, but like emotions bubbled up. It was like a mixture of anger, of like, how could you like, you haven't talked to me in 10 years. And granted, I haven't either, but it's one of those things of, shouldn't there be a conversation, or shouldn't there be something, but there's just a gift? Like, maybe we should start with some, and that I think is an olive branch of his, but there were so many times where I just wanted a conversation and I just wanted something else from him. And so I realized in that moment that even though I had gone through therapy and I had released him from my life, and I had, in my mind, moved on to the point where like I was my own person, I was so comfortable with where I was and who I was and the people that I had around me that I was almost like disappointed in myself for having a reaction, because I knew that the reaction meant that whatever it was, and in this case it was, you know, the relationship with my father, whatever it was still had power over me. And I was like, why am I allowing something that is so from so long ago still have power over me when I think that I've moved on, but I haven't? I'm still allowing it to affect me. And I will say, like, I'm grateful that he did send it, because it actually made me, I think for the first time, confront the fact that while I went through a lot of healing, I never released the anger that I had been treated a certain way and never received any form of apology. And in that moment, years and years and years later, I felt like I had finally released the pain and released that portion that I was holding on to for so long. And I say all of that because I think it's easy when you go through life and you work through things on yourself and you start taking that self-love journey and you start really leaning on your inner body to push you forward and to grow and to embrace who you are. We also have to embrace all of those hard parts. And with that comes those waves that we have to learn to ride, because it's not all good. And we shouldn't feel guilty because something that triggered us or something that was so monumental in our life comes back up, bubbles back to the surface. We're only human. And I think healing takes different forms and you have to go on the journey with it to get to the next train stop. And I think of healing way more like I'm riding a train and the end station is the end of my life, and each stop is a progression if I make it a progression, and each stop is an opportunity to possibly revisit something from your past in a different form or even the same form, so that you finally can confront it and feel healed. And it might take several stops for it to get to that point where you feel like you can release it and go to the next town, or you can go to the next country, or you can go to the next chapter of your life. But you might need to confront something several times in different ways to heal. And I was actually reading up on this the other day of when someone feels triggered, it's as if you are reliving that exact moment in time of trauma, even though you're in a different situation. It's like your mind doesn't know that your body is in a physically different state. So like it might think you are back to being 13 and hiding in the bathroom from trauma and crying your eyes out and just running away. And then somebody might trigger you, or like say you have an argument and someone follows you. That has been a trigger of mine, is like, I cannot be followed during an argument, even though I also can't be left alone because I have a fear of abandonment. So anyways, that's a whole other topic. But like, you might feel like you're in the same situation and it's almost as if you're reliving it. And so I think that when healing isn't that linear path and you have to ride those waves, you don't know if something's going to trigger something from your past because it's a completely different situation. It might be a different person, different, age, different circumstances, but it doesn't mean that it might not affect you. But sometimes we have to get into relive those things, or we have to be triggered in order to eventually ride that wave fully and heal from something. And I think the biggest thing in learning that healing isn't linear is that I need to be gentle with myself, and I need to be understanding with myself, that I don't have to feel ashamed, I don't have to feel disappointed, I don't have to feel guilty that I'm not over something, or that something has come up in a different way and I need to address it again. There is no checkbox for healing. There just isn't. And while part of me is very type A, and I would love to have just a checklist of my fucking problems and go one by one and say, healed from childhood trauma, healed from abandonment, healed my self-worth, healed this. It's not the case. And even in your confidence journey and your inner baddie journey and really leaning into that portion of yourself to get you through tough times, you might get through those tough times, but there might be tough times ahead. And I don't think that we should just fake positivity or fake the fact that I should just be over something and just think that you get mad at yourself because you think you should be done with something. There's no should. Your journey is your own, and there's even days on like confidence. And sometimes going through this podcast, I've even struggled with it. I'll be very honest that even though what I preach is this force of confidence and this force to be reckoned with and this force within you, that if you tap into it, you grow it and you nurture it and you sustain it, and it becomes your reality and it fuels the rest of your future. I wholeheartedly believe in that, but that doesn't mean that I don't have days where I don't feel fucking confident, where I have to give myself those pep talks that I want to give you through the camera or through your headphones or through this podcast. Like, I want to be that person that lifts you up, and sometimes I have to lift myself up too. It's why I write love letters to myself, because I still can struggle with it. There are days where I think that I have given myself enough love to really know my worth, and no one can shake that. And unfortunately, because I've had a rough relationship with my father growing up, men especially can make me feel, or not make me feel, because obviously it's my own stuff coming up, but I will allow myself to feel like for a second, for a moment, for a day, that I'm unworthy. And I have to be like, what the fuck am I thinking? I am fully whole within myself. But it's that path of, just because I've poured into myself and I feel very worthy doesn't mean that I won't struggle from time to time, or somebody might pop into my life and try to take away my light and try to make me feel lesser than, or give it their fucking best. But you know what we gotta do is get the fuck up again. Look at yourself in the mirror method. Do what you gotta do. Give yourself a pep talk. Write yourself a letter. Because we're never necessarily fully healed. We will all struggle and we will all have our days. And either you can lean on a podcast like this, or you can lean on a friend, or you can lean on your damn self. and lift yourself up, or all of the above. There is no wrong answer to feeling better. There's absolutely no wrong answer and no combination that should be off limits if it makes you feel like your badass self again. But we will feel like our badass selves again. I will feel confident again. And I know that while healing isn't linear, the same as like you've got to ride those waves to get to where you want to go, and you shouldn't feel down on yourself, the same goes for how your self-love journey is. And sometimes you have to be the person that charges forward and understands that it's a feeling, it's not a reality. And I tell that to myself, and I tell that to my friends all the time. It's a feeling, not a reality. Your reality is your constant. Just like healing, you might have ups and you might have downs, but your constant is your base. Your sense of self-worth, your sense of confidence, that's your base. And you might have days where you're like, God damn, I feel good. And you might have days where you're like, God damn, I feel terrible. Or shit, I can't believe I let someone affect my self-confidence. Or I can't believe I allowed myself to get down on something. I mean, we've all been there, whether it's, you know, heartbreak, you lose somebody in your life, or grief, or you lose a job, or you might want a job and you might be striving and interviewing, really pushing for that, and you don't get it. But all of those things are fleeting moments. They don't make you who you are. And the more that you push through those periods of uncomfortableness, don't even know if that's a word, but you get what I mean. If you push past that, you will understand how to ride those waves and how to live in the constant and not the up and down, both in healing of being triggered or being happy and working on yourself. Those periods you'll level out. And same with the way that you attack your confidence and the way that you attack life and the way that you decide to be your baddest self. You will understand that it is a journey, and you'll have your ups and you'll have your downs, but at the end of the day, we all return to the constant. We all return to the baseline, and that's why it's so important to, one, understand that it's okay to feel like you've healed from something and then have it come back up. And it's also okay for your confidence to be rocked. It's okay. And I think the more that we give ourselves grace and the more that we understand that we don't have to always be up or down and we can ride that constant, the more that we'll understand that that's where we want to ultimately live. Like, yes, do I love the highs of my life? Abso-freaking-lutely. Like, I just had one of the best weekends with my friends ever. Like, the energy, the love, the fun, the laughter, the joy. I mean, I would love to be stuck in those moments for a very long time. But I understand that that's a high, and my normal isn't always going to be that high, and that's okay. And I hope that by listening to this, that the next time you feel like, I don't feel so confident, or the next time you feel like, didn't I just go to fucking therapy for this? Like, why am I crying about it? Like, I've had this happen to me, and I've had it happen to other people, like, especially with heartbreak. You're like, why the hell am I still crying over this person? Like, or having feelings come up out of the blue months later. That's okay. That's part of your process. So embrace the process, because you don't heal and you don't get to that absolute wholehearted feeling of loving yourself if you don't take steps to get there. And those steps can go up, they can go down, and sometimes you feel like I just climbed to the top of the fucking mountain and I just slid all the way down. But I guarantee you, you didn't slide all the way down. You might have slid a few steps. You're not as far off as you think you are. And if you gather yourself and you remember how much you love yourself, you're gonna get right back up, and the mountain's only gonna grow from here. You are only gonna grow from here. And you're gonna be even more badass when you give yourself grace and you understand that setbacks do not determine your future. And with that, say it with me, I'm a fucking baddie. All right, love y'all till next time.